that's why they call them marching orders. What's going on, everybody? This is the Cover Band Confidential Podcast, the podcast for cover band musicians and band leaders to learn how to rock more inside glass. In Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Adam Johnson.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, I'm Dan Ray.
What's new, man?
Well, a few things, including one piece of gear that we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yes. Lots of discussion about new things.
New things. I will say we also had a first rehearsal today with the post-finger injury bassist. He's fine. He played fine. It doesn't feel too bad. The stitches are out. He's back on the living. I guess it's a gas-powered model airplane he was working with.
Props.
And it's the kind of thing you spin it with your finger to get it to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I've always as a hobbyist.
Yeah.
I know you're supposed to either use like a stick or some sort of starting thing.
Starter thing. He said, he had it on chocks under its wheels, so it couldn't push forward on him. But as he was spinning it, it was slowly backing up. And then it had room behind the chocks to accelerate into his hand. And, he said he had on cut-proof gloves, which is what you do to do this safely. And it cut him through the gloves. The gloves didn't cut, but the pressure of it cut to the bone on his finger enough that there was question of amputation when he got to the ER. This was a major injury. And he's 2 weeks later, he's playing bass. So
all's well that ends well.
Yeah,
Holy smokes.
Seriously.
I'm not a fan of that storyline.
No, I don't like it at all.
Nothing new on our front. We're just trying to get practice figured out. We had an on-site for an event in a couple of weeks on Friday, just kind of tying up some loose ends. Feel like we're helping the client with vendors. They've asked us for a number of things, and I'm not getting a cut out of any of those. It just, I know people. And
solution to a problem.
So that's what we're trying to do. And just mostly just stuff around the podcast and the community and all that stuff. Speaking of community.
Boy, oh boy.
Should we go to reviews?
Yeah.
Let's do it. This one's brand spanking new. Came in over the weekend. This is Vinny Jumper 12 on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars. Covering your bases. Pun intended. There is so much more to being in a cover band than just showing up and playing. Adam and Dan do a remarkable job of bringing attention to the fine details of being a professional musician, in addition to being an efficient band leader as well. I particularly like when the guys revisit topics, as there's always something new to consider in this business. The conversations are real, humorous, and sometimes quite poignant. It makes you feel like you are a part of the discussion with 2 of your friends. Thanks for everything, Vinny Savoya, a crystal baller out in Phoenix, Arizona.
Nice.
Thanks to Vinny for
Thanks,
the kind
Vinny.
words, man.
That's awesome.
If you want your band shouted out on the show, leave a review. We'll talk about it. Anyway, we gear talk this week.
We got gear talk, and let's just go ahead and start with the one that is most present and pertinent. I don't know about you, but I've been getting ads all across my socials for these Phenyx Pro wireless setups, both in-ears and wireless mics. I've been seeing them all over the place, and the price is it's like a 4-pack or an 8-pack of mics for staggeringly small amounts of money compared to the things that people think of as professional and reliable. And so, obviously, I am someone who has experienced trying to cheap out on wireless and spending way more over the long run, trying to replace guitar wireless things that were, turned out to be toys, and then finally getting, in bed with the real stuff and really understanding the difference between the two, but a long, expensive road to get there. Well, I've always kind of said, if there's a way to test a thing cheap, you may as well do it. Well, a deal came out for the Phenyx Pro PTU 71, which is 2 mics, and a receiver that's standalone. It's not a rack mount receiver, which is good for me because I use a vocal effects pedal, and what I don't want to do is trundle a cable from my rack to my pedal board back to the rack. It's pretty terrible. I have done that in the past. It's not great. But this deal came up, and it was the Phenyx Pro PTU 71 with 2 mics and a standalone receiver, delivered to my house for $144.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. So how do you not pull a trigger on that? So I did.
Yeah.
And I'm, in fact, speaking to you through it right now. And I think it sounds pretty darn good. I will say I did not bring it to rehearsal today. I got enough moving parts already with a band that I haven't gigged in a few months that I'm not going to add these to that. But I like how they sound on their own. I can't speak to how they work in a band context yet. But our buddy Adam from the Van Band also got a pair, and he also agrees they sound pretty darn good. How are they for range? How are they for reliability? How are they for cutting through traffic in an RF environment? Hard to say. I will say this. They have some features that I do not expect at this price point. At this price point, I would have expected a fixed frequency. And if something's interfering on your frequency, you're boned. But these, in fact, have auto detect of open frequencies. It can scan a room and find a frequency, and then program the handhelds by IR, which is a feature that you don't see on the bottom end of the market. It's really,
I mean, my Sennheisers do that.
Your Sennheisers do that. Yeah, my Mi Pro in-ears do that. But for $144, I did not expect that. I expected to be at least manually programming everything.
I feel like we, as like, you know, musicians of a certain vintage, feel like cheap wireless is just like that old Nady gear,
right?
That you could get. It was like $99, but like,
you buy it at Radio Shack, which doesn't exist anymore. Yep. Yeah, I think between that and like the way computer controlled milling has brought up the quality of the bottom end of the guitar market, I think there's just some facts of the last few years of electronics that maybe change how that is, you know, what the price structure of these things is. I'm pretty impressed with this guy so far. I will try it in the rehearsal room. My standard move is to put on my wireless in-ears and a wireless, it's been the guitar, but I'll be the mic, and like walk down the hallway of the storage facility that we practice in. Because you get far enough, there are many pieces of sheet steel between you and the receivers and transmitters. And it's a pretty good test. So yeah, I look forward to trying that.
Yeah, the whole Phenyx thing became a phenomenon in the Patreon Slack. I feel like. Yeah. Well, the other funny thing is that because Phenyx Pro is sold through Amazon, a lot of times you're like, I'm thinking about getting this thing, and then, you know, a week or two goes by, and then you get a picture.
Amazon's
man, it came. But this is literally like less than 24 hours. Right. Like everybody had what they were looking for.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, we'll be sure to drop a link for that in the show notes for anybody who's curious. We're not quite fully ready to give it the full stamp.
No, not yet. But
preliminary stuff looks good.
Yeah. It may very well be that if you're looking for a cheap way into wireless, which I recommend, man. Some of the best times of my band life have been when I could put down my guitar and like roam the venue. Yep. Oh, it's just the best, engaging with people. And like, it's, you know, wireless is very much worth it if you can find a rig that is reliable. That's really the critical thing. I'll spend money for reliability, but if I don't have to spend money for reliability, then that's all the better.
Very true. So the other thing that I wanted to get into, and I feel like this is one of those situations where a piece of gear drops that is truly just tailor-made for our audience.
Yep.
And this was very interesting because I had been thinking about doing a video explaining Ed Sheeran's looping setup. And by the time I put it out, the very next day, all that scrapped because he's come out with this new line of things.
Obsoleted.
So this week, Ed Sheeran released his own signature line of looping pedals. And they're pretty phenomenal. The feature set and the general user interface stuff is really impressive. For those of you who don't know the whole backstory, Ed Sheeran has been playing clubs, stadiums, whatever, with this really innovative looping setup. Now, his main deal is basically just software on top of Ableton Live, and he's got these really cool controllers that basically give him the visual readouts that he needs in order to do what he does. Well, he's now come out with a physical hardware unit, 2 different models that mimic the workflow that he uses. And he's done demos with the new stuff, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's really well done. It's really good.
Yeah. So 2 models. We've got the entry level and then the Big Daddy. Both of these are made through Headrush Effects, by the way. They're the ones helping develop the back end. So all of these features are things that are coming from Headrush. Entry-level model is called the Looper Plus, and it retails for $299, but it's got a lot of really great features for something this size and price point. So it's a 2-channel input. It's got visual readouts around this rotary encoder. It's got a little LED display. It can hold, I think, 3+ hours of audio internally. It's got stereo outs, external foot switch. I mean, the feature set and stuff is just outrageous. They do literally everything. But this one is kind of the more simplified, basic deal. It would be, I would say, a pretty solid step up from something like a Ditto, where you have a bit more control over things.
Or even the 2-pedal Boss, loop station. It's a more refined version of that.
For sure. It's probably the one that they'll sell the most of, but it's not necessarily the one that we got the most excited over. Because the main one, the one that is kind of the biggest deal, is what they're calling Looper X. And Looper X is a Helix-sized looping setup, which doesn't necessarily replace the headrush looping station that they already have. That being said, I don't know any place that sells those.
No, I think they're actually out of print. Those ones, I think they're out of manufacture.
Yeah. So this is kind of their next wave, but it is specifically a design that looks like what Ed Sheeran already does. So this is not just a restamp of an existing product. This is very unique to itself.
Discontinued is the word I was looking for. Discontinued.
Yes.
The pedals don't go out of print.
Yeah. They turn the presses off.
That's right.
So this one is a 4-channel looper. We got 8 pedals. We got a 7-inch touchscreen display, which everybody knows headrush is kind of famous for.
Yep.
Tons of I/O. You've got stereo outputs that can be used as stereo, split, dual mono, headphones, MIDI in and out, USB in and out, just all kinds of stuff. And the thing that I really like about both of these units is the visual readouts that you get. Now, on the Looper Plus, on the left side above the record button is this rotary encoder, and it's got a light around it. And when you are doing recording and playback, does the progress through the LED on the rotary encoder. So you have that visual readout. Looper X gives you the setup that you might have seen Ed Sheeran have, which when you start recording something, it shows the waveform going in so that you know that your levels are good. You can switch views where it's got different meters for every single track. It's really phenomenal. And we haven't even gotten into like the functionality or the stuff that's in it. This is just the baseline. The feature list in this thing is outrageous.
It is.
And there was some specific stuff that you really were excited about that kind of gave you pause about what you're currently using.
Well, I mean, for my acoustic setup, first of all, looping was something I intended to get really amazing at during the pandemic, and I never did. So I'm not speaking as a looper in particular. I'd like to be one.
Loopologist.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool skill that I don't have.
Yeah.
But I do have a vocal pedal I mentioned earlier in the form that is part of my basic setup for acoustic. I don't use it as much with the band, but I do go through it. I route through it just because it's part of my setup. But I use harmonies. I use effects of various types. I use I think I have some pitch correction on, but I don't think it's doing much for me these days. I think I'm fairly solid. But a lot of that stuff is in this pedal. So could it be a thing that could replace that whole vocal pedal board? Maybe. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. So as far as the onboard effects, they have 29 different pedal effects: chorus, distortion, delay, reverb, modulation, and then there are what they're calling built-in multi-effects racks. So you basically comes with all the presets for what they're calling common rig layouts. And there's actually an Ed Sheeran one that has his signal chain, the thing that he uses live. And it includes all of the vocal stuff. So yeah, you're getting harmony, pitch correction, reverbs, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It is very much an all-in-one deal. It would be cool if it had some amps, because even Ed Sheeran has started using electric guitars for part of his stuff. And we're real close, though. And the fact of the matter is that, I mean, headrush has it, so
right.
They could literally, snap their fingers and put them in there. So lots to be excited about. The only thing that isn't exciting is the price tag on this thing.
Yeah.
It's also apparently very large. It's about the size of a full-size Helix from what I've been told.
Yeah.
But the retail on this is $1,299, so a full $1,000 more than the entry-level one. Personally, I think it's going to be a home run.
I think the small one will be.
I think the big one will sell, surprisingly.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Because if you're looking at 2 pieces of gear, I mean, right now, I've got that Voice Live GTX. I could sell that for whatever I want because they don't make them anymore.
Right.
They're out of print,
out of print,
as you
yes.
said. So $1,299 for something like this, if I did a ton of solo work and was really into looping, that's an easy yes.
Yeah.
Because frankly, there's nothing on the market that offers this workflow. And frankly, it is one of the best workflows out there.
Yeah.
Like everything is laid out very intuitively. The digital readouts, I think it's a slam dunk crap.
Well,
sure.
The one criticism is the number of tracks. There are products on the market that have more tracks than that and more flexibility in terms of their layering and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's a fair critique. Sheeran's main setup is 8 channels, and this being 4. I think a lot of people were hoping it would be 6.
Mhm.
I think that would kind of justify the price point. But again, this being a new product and what it does offer, I'm willing to potentially look the other way.
Sure.
You know,
These days, you buy these things and you know you're committing to an ecosystem and a life cycle of upgrades and all that kind of stuff. So I got room for it not to be the full bird right out the gate. You know?
listen, this is the third head rush video we've made, or podcast we've had
I know.
in the past like 6 months.
I know. They're really coming on strong. We're still looking at the core and the prime. Those are still really compelling offerings.
And people seem to like them.
Yep.
The comments on the YouTube versions of those conversations is glowing. So
Yep.
good on them. All right, let's get into a little bit of housekeeping. Now, Dan, I'm not sure if you've been paying attention, but our Patreon has kind of exploded over the past couple of weeks.
Just past 3 days, right?
Yeah.
Something over the
I mean,
weekend.
Yes. This weekend, we welcomed 3 new folks, like literally one right after the other.
Yeah.
We have this little introduction channel. And, Greg, Jacob, and Paul all signed up basically on the same day and have started contributing to the community, and it's been awesome. I went and looked at the stats. We've actually gotten 10 new patrons this year alone,
Okay.
just
That's good.
in January and February.
I'll say,
keep that up.
Yeah, doing great. I don't know Greg or Jacob. Look forward to getting to know them. Paul Shu is in my market here, and I know him.
Yeah.
He's been around a long time. I've been around the community of the show for a long time. His band, Spindle 45, is super great, and they play mainly at the Winston-Salem area and cross paths with them. So, yeah,
Nice.
great to see Paul. He showed up on the Patreon. I was like, Paul Shu, how about that?
I believe what you wrote was, "As I live and breathe."
That's right. That's right.
This is a thing that Southern people say.
Southern people do say that.
So we just want to welcome all of our new folks. And I did want to note that we are currently having a merch sale. The problem is that the discount code, which is everything20, will have expired by the time this episode comes out.
Oh.
So if you want to know when our merch goes on sale, you should go to our merch store and sign up, because we send emails out when those happen. And it'll probably be a month or so before the prices go down again. So go check that out. Link will be in the show notes, and sign up.
Cool. Yeah.
That's it as far as housekeeping goes.
Okay.
Now, this topic came in via email. We will not mention who it is, just because sometimes things that you say on the internet have real life consequences. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're just not going to worry about that. But this was a topic that I brought to the Patreon group, and then I posted it on social media elsewhere. And the conversation around this topic was heated and contradictory,
Yeah.
but everybody feels a way about it.
Yes.
So it felt like the perfect time to talk about it on the show. So here is what that email says. We've had a lot of inquiries for private events recently, but have had our diary, hopefully it's not too much to give away where it's from,
Yeah.
mainly filled with pub and club bookings. I personally don't want to let down a venue, so I've only done it once so far for a wedding, and that was a good 6 months in advance, so venue had time to find another band. What is your stance on canceling gigs for better pay? Honor the existing booking, take the higher paid private stuff, find another band to fill in the club/bar booking, and take the higher paid gigs. What do you do? Thoughts?
Well, I've always felt like in this business, you literally are your word. And if
Yep.
you have booked, that you've got the conversation far enough that the venue's expecting you and there's an agreement about time and price and what's going to get delivered, my view has always been you do that.
Yeah.
You do that thing. And even if it means you have to have a tough conversation with somebody who wants you on that night and maybe can't change, you're not going to talk the wedding into being on a different day because you're not coming. So that's always been my opinion about it. And I know opinions varied widely on the Patreon, but
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's some pretty... This is interesting because I feel like my stance on it has evolved the more I hear other people talk about it.
Okay.
But the general gist is karma sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a musician that dips out for higher paying gigs and stuff, it's reputational suicide. It's something that you don't want to be known as a person who doesn't commit to things.
Right.
And that is the general, consensus is like, no, it's bad business.
Yeah.
whether
Now,
you're a band or a hired gun.
Now, so just to have this not be a 5-minute conversation or 3, the counter argument is, what do I care if my reputation with bars and clubs goes to crap, because I'm getting into a bigger game now, and that bigger game is calling me, and the dates that bigger game wants me, I'm going to make myself available. Oh, do you think karma is segmented in that way?
Well, I think there are 2 ways to kind of approach that particular argument, and that is macro versus micro. So sometimes you have to zoom out and look at the big picture. And again, context matters, but if you are turning down an $800 gig to do a $1,200 gig, there's a good chance that you lose both of those gigs in the future. If we're talking about something that might put you into a different echelon, if we're talking like $800 and $8,000, that's an easy conversation to have. Let's say that happened. You had a bar gig booked, and then you got some crazy corporate event and you had some time, like even a month out. If I went to somebody and I was like, I'm sorry, this is the biggest payday my band has ever had, and I don't know what to do. I feel like that would be something where even the agent would be like, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. And it's also true that every venue you might cancel on has a small book of bands that have come to him in the last 6 months saying, hey, if you ever have a cancellation, let me know. Yep. I can make it happen on the drop of a hat. So you're only leaving them so much in the lurch. They got a little extra work to do all of a sudden, but it's not impossible to find a fill in. That's actually pretty straightforward to do.
Well, and another good point that came up that I had never even considered is, when you're talking about, well, can you cancel on a venue? Somebody else was like, well, you got to look at it the other side too. If you can cancel gigs for better paid days, then venues can start canceling you for cheaper options.
Yeah.
So think about that. You booked a date 6 weeks out. They go, we're going to do a DJ and we're not going to pay you anything.
Right.
You would feel pretty miffed about that.
That would,
but I mean,
that wouldn't be cool.
That's the equivalency.
I got canceled a solo acoustic show because there was a touring band coming through and they could snag them for that date. And I didn't love it, but I kind of got it. Like, it's going to be a better opportunity for the bar than my karaoke night. I don't know, a lot, but karaoke night, so eat it. But the fact of that cancellation it bugged me. I won't stop doing business with those guys. Actually, that's where my next gig is in 2 weeks with the band. But yeah, cancellation for a better business opportunity on either side is kind of not great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other thoughts about this, but I think it really boils down to the situation, and there are a lot of factors to take into consideration. And the other thing is you need to look at the relationships you already have with these venues. Because if it's something where you've got a working relationship and you've been playing there for 3 years and something crazy happens, the likelihood of you burning that bridge relationally goes way down.
Yeah.
Because you've set a baseline. You've built
you built trust.
A working agreement with these people. Yeah. Versus just showing up at a gig in a venue that you've never played before, and then you dip out for a better option. Like, you're done. Bridge burned, done.
Yeah, you won't be back there. Now, there's a band in my market that I've known really well for a long time. Their band leader's a friend. I'm not going to say their name, but a few years ago, before the pandemic, they got signed with a booker, like a booking agency that was then booking them for bigger ticket stuff. And it was a good example of a band moving up market. But then he kept showing up on Facebook like, hey, I'm looking for a replacement for my band for Saturday night. He was trying to fill in. He was trying to be able to bring a solution to the venue he was canceling on, which I like that better than just saying I'm canceling, but I still don't like it. And the reality is that band is now, as I look at them now, and it's been some years and some lockdowns, but I don't really see them having the traction in the bar and club market that they used to have. And they also went through rebrand that didn't really take, and they're back to their original name. So there's been some churn. There's been a lot. It's not just simple cause and effect here. There's multiple factors at play. But I do think that the perception of unreliability around them has had some impact on that.
Well, and a lot of people who were on the side of, yes, it's okay to do this, almost all of them had the caveat that you would be a part of the backfilling process.
Yeah.
So you're creating a problem, but you're also contributing to finding the solution for the problem. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that is another way to conscientiously kind of approach a situation like this. So it's not cut and dry. I think there is nuance to the question itself, but I think in certain circumstances, every one of those positions is correct. I guess.
Yeah.
If that's helpful.
It is. You got to play it by ear, but you got to be very aware that there are reputational risks at play that you just shouldn't take lightly.
Well, yeah. And ultimately, you've got to decide whether said risk is worth that reward.
That's right.
And just be willing to deal with the consequences if it is not.
There you go.
That's it.
That's it.
I feel pretty good about that.
Me too. I feel like we landed right on the answer there.
Well, sometimes you come in with your bias. Your bias is pretty strong. That's what's your kind of late. I feel like we gave everybody an out. They can listen to this episode and go, they made some good points because they made the point that I would have made, but they didn't lean too heavily on the other points either.
No matter what you think, we validated you.
Yes. Ultimately, our goal is to podcast is for you to turn the thing down and go,
yep,
those guys are all right.
Yep, those guys agree with me. It's all good.
That's broadcasting for you.
Oh my God, that is tragically true.
Oh man. Anywho, good talk.
Yeah, good one.
Exciting stuff. I always love when there's new things and new folks and fun topics.
Yeah.
We love it when you guys hit us up. The emails with the questions, man.
Joining the Patreon?
100%. Do it all.
Do it.
So let's just go ahead and say we'll just call it for that.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Couldn't do it without you. Love you. If you want to support the show, you can do it all these different ways that Michael is about to tell you. So I'll go ahead and call it for this week. In Atlanta, Georgia, I am Adam Johnson.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, I'm Dan Ray.
You have been listening to the Cover Band Confidential Podcast for the week of March 8th, 2024.